This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the scramble for Mali between a disorganized civilian opposition, the military still lurking in the shadows after returning to barracks a few months ago. Overnight, they forced the arrest. After his arrest, they forced the resignation of the prime minister, who was then free to go. With us to talk about it, Kassim Kone, who teaches at the State University of New York at Cortland. Also with us here in the studio, risk consultant Lydie Boca, Director of Strategy Co., French Foreign Ministry spokesperson Vincent Floriani, Pierre Connaissant, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po, and Michael Kirtley, who is a journalist and documentary filmmaker, knows the Sahelian region well. Before I go back to you, Michael, just a reminder for our viewers, it's not one, not two, but at least 4 different armed factions that are present in the north, although the Tuareg separatists of the MNLA were quickly muscled out and controlled no territory of their own. As you can see, 4 movements on this chart. In fact, there's fears there could even be more of these as some of these movements splinter. But we were saying just before the break about the mediation efforts of Blaise Compaoré. Blaise Compaoré, who's been talking, as you were saying, to a lot of people.
Well, and also the Burkina foreign minister went up and actually had direct talks with Ansar Dine and was trying to get them to renounce certain of their claims on, about applying Sharia law and other things. I personally don't take much stock in the different declarations of Ansar Dine, because at the same time that they're making declarations that seem somewhat soft, their leader, Ayad al-Ghali, is going up and talking to the people of Akim up in Timbuktu. But
Akim are those Salafists who claim to be Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb.
Right. They call themselves Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. They may or may not have a direct affiliation with Al-Qaeda, but what is sure is that many of their founders came out of Algeria during the Algerian Civil War. The problem that I see is that there's a question of interest. And what is the interest in northern Mali? The interest could be one just of control of the territory, as the extremists and as the MNLA have talked about. However, you have to wonder why it is, and I think that perhaps that the French Foreign Ministry may have been thinking about this, why it was during the months of June and July that the Burkinabe presidency was hosting at the very highest levels different emissaries from Ansar Dine and the best hotels in downtown Ouagadougou, while at the same time, when they were trying to carry out this mediation, the MNLA was put in the lower hotels in Burkina Faso. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that.
There is another layer of confusion to add to all this, Pierre Connaissant. There's a bustling trade in hostages going on. And could that be part of the explanation to what Michael Kirtley was just talking about?
I would like to pay attention to one point which seems to me very important. When you look at the total amount of ransom which is asked by the different movements you have listed, you have quoted.
How many? Hold on one second. How many French hostages are there right now in the South?
7 of them now.
7 who have been held for...
With this latest one that was taken in Western Mali.
Right.
Yeah. But there are also other Western hostages. So which means that when you take into account the total amount of ransom asked by the movement, it's something around 150 million euros, which means that it's something like 2/3 of the military budget of Mali. You understand what it means? It means that if we pay ransom for hostages, we fund the rebels, and you do know how democracy is working. I mean, you can't give up with your hostages, which means that we are planning a military intervention and funding our enemies. I think there is somewhere a contradiction I don't understand. But these figures are very important to understand that the real economy of this movement are mainly to put taxes on the traffic, to participate to drug trafficking, and to take hostages, which is an industry in Mali.
And not just in Mali.
Not just in Mali, yeah, you're right.
I think there are two important points. I'll come back to what is the interest in the region, really. But coming back to the role of Blaise Compaoré, there have been persistent rumors, I think more than rumors, that there might be a few groups that he favors, like Mugel, which is the most violent group that killed.
But why does he favor? Why would the president of Burkina Faso favor some Islamist group in the north? Why is this? I don't understand.
I think it's part of the question you asked. Is he part of the solution or of the problem? He's been mediating in several crises in West Africa. It's been going on for at least 10 years, and his role has been could be qualified as dubious in a number of crises. I'm not going to name now. And so beyond Mujao, there's the issue of Qatar, which also allegedly plays a role in the region. And it leads me to the interest.
What kind of role?
Qatar has been funding humanitarian assistance, Red Cross Crescent out of Niger, and also in one of the cities in the north, without going to the worst hit areas, going through the official, the nice hospitals that don't need help, and pouring a lot of money. If you look at MNLA and the so-called Azawad territory, there's a lot of oil. There's an oil problem. There is that's yet to be completely assessed. But back in February, there were already talks between Algeria and the then government about assessing the reserves there. So it might be part of the problem, going all the way up to Libya and Qatar's role there as well. I think we need to ask the right questions beyond Burkina and Mujao and all these groups. What is really at stake?
All right, so it's getting a bit confusing here. Is Qatar really involved in any kind of way with what's going on, Vincent Floriani?
Yeah, I mean, I've no clue. I can't confirm these allegations.
Michael
what we do know is, I don't know about the northern part of that territory, but what we do know is that there have been humanitarian vehicles from Qatar, from the Qatari Red Crescent, that have gone from Niamey up to Gao. And what we do know, as you were saying, Lydia, is that they tend to go to the places where they're not needed the most. And they tend to go directly to work directly with the Mujao up in Gao. Now, what happens and what was in those trucks, that's a matter of speculation. But there's no doubt that Qatari humanitarian agencies...
Are you hinting that they're perhaps not sending aid at all, but supporting somehow jihadists?
That certainly is what's been suspected.
All right. What is for sure is that jihadists are no longer welcome in the north. Nearly 9 months after Islamists took over there, France 24's correspondent in Mali got footage from the one-time tourist stopover of Gao. There you see it on the map. Gao, where the locals insisted that their faces be shown on camera so they could heap scorn on the new people in charge in the town.
In Gao, women can't go without their full veil. It's now the law and applies to girls of school age too. But in this class, girls and boys are still being taught together, something the region's new Islamist leaders have banned.
People came and told us we had to have one class for girls and another for boys.
This teacher resisted but might not be able to for much longer. Since taking control of Gao in June, Islamists have imposed their version of Sharia law, closing bars, banning smoking and imposing corporal punishment. New rules that aren't supported by everyone here.
We don't support Sharia law. It sucks. It's squeezing the life from here. We can't work in Gao, and there are no jobs left.
Gao's economy has nosedived since the Islamist groups took over. Water and electricity supplies have faltered. Unemployment has rocketed. But any plans by the government for military intervention have been slow to materialise.
How long does it take? We'll be waiting 9 months at least. How are we going to survive until then? With these Islamists in control? We have to say to the UN, to ECOWAS, to the African Union, do something fast, very fast.
But the current preference is for words over action. The MNLA and Ansar Din rebel groups have held preliminary talks with the Malian government, talks that have officially excluded the Mujao and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb.
Kassim Kone, have you been able to speak to people that are north of that divide in cities like Gao and Timbuktu?
Yes, I do have some acquaintances there. They are still suffering a lot from the consequences of this war. Especially places like Menaka recently, where it had actually a big fight. I think that was about 2 Fridays ago. A big fight between MNLA groups and Ansar. But it was one of the Salafist groups against Tuareg. That left a lot of death. So Gao, the region of Gao, is still suffering a lot. There is no security anywhere. But I also heard that many of the leaders of movements are fleeing, that disappearing at least from sight. I don't know if they are still in the cities, but some of them have disappeared. You don't see them that much anymore. But the situation remains very grim, in the northern part.
A very grave situation in the north.
Yeah.
Vincent Floriani, is it exaggerated when we say that northern Mali is in danger of becoming another Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, you cannot compare different situations, but yes, it's a huge threat. It's becoming a safe haven for terrorists that are threatening the whole region. You have there humanitarian problems, grave violations of human rights. I mean, as was shown on your report. We have to act, and that's why we are supporting a new resolution at the UN Security Council to allow the deployment of an African-led force to try to answer this security problem we have there.
An African-led force, 3,300 troops it would be. Lydie Boka, is that going to happen?
It's going to happen if the international community provides some 200 million euros, I heard, or was it dollars, needed, because, as you know, the African countries have limited means and they haven't been able to come up with any kind of financial support for that. And also they need training themselves. I think what might happen is that they might spearhead some kind of intervention. Of course, they cannot provide a timetable at the moment for strategic reasons, but they might start and then be backed by French and international forces.
But when you see, Pierre Conessa, that the Prime Minister was favorable to having that outside intervention force, and the boys that are in the barracks in Bamako, not really, they don't want to see foreign troops, it's going to make it all the more hard for those West African forces to deploy.
Yeah, but I'm wondering a question. I mean, if one thinks that Mali could become a new Afghanistan, when you look at the military treatment of the Afghan crisis and you see at the result, the question is, why a military action in Mali? I mean, to deal with a crisis with military means, what does that mean? It means a non-policy. And you understand what I mean? So we are using the same means that we have used in Afghanistan, probably with the same result at the end.
So a political solution obviously would be better.
Yeah, probably.
And that's what, by the way, the head of the U.S. forces in Africa was saying. General Carter Ham sat down with France 24's Mark Perlman last month and showed precious little enthusiasm for sending U.S. troops to the Sahara Desert.
Before we leap immediately to a military solution, there should be, in our ongoing efforts, to resolve this situation without having to apply military force.
Michael Curley?
Well, there's no doubt that the attitude of the United States is very hesitant right now, not least because their main interest is the terrorists. They're not as interested as the French in the idea of territorial integrity, although they will follow the French, but they're very interested in the counterterrorism. However, the biggest problem is, how could you have a negotiated settlement when you've got these jihadist groups like Hakim and Mujahou that are not interested in negotiation? And probably if there is an African force that is brought in, will just disappear into the desert to fight again. And I think that if you're talking about a political solution, you cannot reduce that to just the ECOWAS forces and the Malian government and the Malian army. You also have to take into consideration the MNLA and the people in that region that they themselves are very interested in getting rid of the terrorists in the area. And so any solution that doesn't include, in my opinion, any solution that doesn't include some sort of integration of the MNLA into that whole dialogue about getting rid of the terrorists is going to fail.
Well, it just so happens there's another player in all of this when it comes to dealing with the Salafists, and that's Algeria. And next week, a key date on the calendar, the French president travels to Algiers, December 19th and 20th. It's a very important visit. Lots on the agenda: natural gas, bilateral trade, immigration, and of course, Vincent Floriani, security in the Sahara. Right now, sources tell us that Abdelaziz Bouteflika has said, look, I'm going to bring some of these guys to the table for you. And he's delivered on that in terms of getting some of the players that we've mentioned, some of those rebel movements, the more moderate ones, to the table. Could the solution to Mali's crisis be found in Algiers when the French president travels there next week?
I mean, definitely we need Algeria to help find a solution. He's a very important player in this situation. It's true that to try to find solution to the crisis in Mali, we need both a political solution and a security solution. The political solution is a dialogue between the north and the south, but in the north only with the elements that reject terrorism, that agree with territorial integrity of Mali. And with the other, we don't see any other solution than a security intervention.
Pierre Conessa, what will happen in Algiers?
Well, I don't think that solution of Malian crisis is in Algeria. Algeria has solved its own question, I mean the civil war, which means that they don't want to participate and to share the burden of this crisis. I mean, they just want to expel, all the people they don't want in the south, which means that in a way they have exported their own crisis in the north of Mali. But the main question of Mali is, how could we find a political solution to make people live together? I mean, the Tuareg people and the people living in the south of the country. That's exactly the same problem we have in Niger, we have in Sudan, we have in Chad, which means this coexistence between two people who don't want to live together. So is the solution is a unification of Mali? I mean, different process. I don't know. Perhaps we can imagine too that it's possible.
Right, so
one day.
The ultimate solution inside of Mali. That's where we're going to have to leave it. Pierre Conessa, Lydie Boka, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Vincent Floriani, Michael Kirtley, and Kassim Kone for joining us from Cortland, New York. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24.